Good, good afternoon, everyone. This is Brian Campbell from the Trees Around the Globe Student Research Campaign, and we're going to get started with today's webinar, and the focus is going to be the New Jersey Pinelands, the nation's first national preservation area, and presenting will be John D. Moore. He's Executive Director of the Institute for Earth Observations at Palmyra Cove Nature Park in Palmyra Cove, New Jersey, in the United States. So we're going to start off with a little bit of intro. I wanted to add a couple new things here for the webinar in the introduction section before we get into the feature presentation. And some of my campaign colleagues, Dr. Christopher Schumann and Dorian Janney, will be adding some really great information to the webinar today. And then we're going to jump into John's presentation. So, a little tree fact here. Trees are one of the world's best absorbers of atmospheric carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas. What does that mean? So understanding how trees and forests change through time is one of the first steps to understanding how active they are in pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, which is of profound interest to scientists monitoring climate change. So we say this so many times, people look at trees and they know that these trees pull in carbon dioxide and convert it to oxygen via photosynthesis. We know this. So, but looking at the height of trees helps us determine how much carbon dioxide is being pulled in or out of the atmosphere, okay? And then once, based upon the size of the tree, the branches, the leaves, how the diameter of the tree at basal, at height, at breast height. So yeah, so lots of things play into this, but I just want to throw up a tree fact here. All right, here's our campaign team again, and I put this up every time so you don't forget who we are. Myself, Dorian Janney, NASA Goddard, Peter Nelson, Oregon State University, Dr. Christopher Schumann, NASA Goddard and University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and Peter Falcon at the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California. Now, Dr. Schumann and I have been, going back and forth about, trees and something related to trees. It's always in the news, whether it's people planting trees, whether it's group planting trees, whether there's competitions between billionaires to see how many trees can be planted. I know there was one between Elon Musk and a couple other people. They were having a competition that they were going to plant, 1 million trees. Someone was going to plant 1,000,001 trees. So we wanted to really highlight, what was happening out there. And Dr. Schumann is, really great at, finding these articles and making sense, having them make sense in the real world. So what I want to do right now is pass it over to Dr. Schumann to talk a little bit about this slide. He's going to explain, this article that he came across about Minnesota and looking at climate change and trees. So I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Brian. My video doesn't seem to be working, but at any rate, this was a recent story from the Washington Post, but part of their overall Pulitzer Prize winning coverage of sort of the impacts of climate change. For those of you that don't read the Washington Post regularly, that news just came out in the past day or so, the Pulitzer Prize Awards. So this is a very substantial area of the United States, almost as far north as you can go, excepting Alaska. As a matter of fact, there's a tiny little piece of Minnesota which extends as far north as anywhere in the lower 48, as we sometimes call them, due to a surveying error. It's kind of a fun little thing to look up if you have access to some good maps. At any rate, the fact that we're seeing pretty dramatic change across a substantial portion of Minnesota and its many, many counties, where birds are clearly migrating, warmer weather species seeing as far north as you can go, up to the edge of Lake Superior, one of the Great Lakes, and also trees migrating as well, becoming less and less rare as you go farther north. So this is a really good article that is very accessible, very topical for the globe trees extended family. And they detail, many of the changes that are going to be likely across Minnesota by 2100. Not in my lifetime, but within a generation or so. And this is just another example, as the Washington Post sort of investigative reporting is detailing, about changes around the globe that are exceeding the global averages and basically leading to dramatic changes in localized areas. So for those of you that grew up reading the legends of Paul Bunyan, you may sort of identify with the forests that are being impacted across Minnesota. So I just took a quick look at the Mauna Loa site. We still haven't peaked for the spring growing season in the Northern Hemisphere. The CO2 reading is up above 417 parts per million again. So in part, the cool spring we've been feeling here, especially in the mid-Atlantic states, and of course, I think across the New England area, has reduced vegetation growth and CO2 uptake. So for those of you that are interested, the Keeling curve is a great place to sort of keep an eye on how global CO2 is changing through time, and especially whether the decreased transportation and manufacturing as a result of the self-isolation changes around the globe may or may not be enough to actually drop us below last fall's minimum CO2 level. So stay tuned. It's an unfolding story, and lots of good things to read, especially at the Washington Post. So just one example here. Thanks, Brian.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah. And this link that you see at the top, we will add that to, as you know, on the webinar page, on the Globe campaign webinar page. We always have the archive recording of the webinars, and then on the bottom we have referenced URLs and websites. We'll include this as one on the bottom, so you don't have to remember this long, this long URL. So yeah, so this is great because this is just one instance where, as the question on the bottom says, can humans help trees keep pace with climate change? And that is a massive, massive issue. That is something, it's a global matter. So, but this is one great article, highlighting this in Minnesota, in the Northwoods area. So thank you so much. All right, so a couple housekeeping things here. As I always do, I go through some of the metrics, and what I want to focus on is what's happening with the full campaign. And the reason I show this as far as the metrics and the data is that when students want to, if they're not able to go out and take observations, as we don't recommend right now during this COVID-19 pandemic, what we want to focus on here are that there are lots of observations that they can go grab, whether it's using the Globe visualization system, the map that pops up, or using the advanced data access tool on Globe. So there's lots of data out there, and probably for the location of where the students are pretty close by. And then we also have the open altimetry tool if they want to compare it to ISAT-2. But this is all the data that we've had from the full campaign. Now, when I say full campaign, this is just from when the campaign started, the bottom section, September 15th, 2018 through the present. It's actually from this morning, where we have over 16,000 tree height measurements from students and citizen scientists. So those are ones, of course, that students are using the handheld clinometers and have used that in the past, and also students are using the trees tool in the NASA Global Observer app, as well as a citizen scientist using the app directly. And then we have over 8,000 global sites. And land cover measurement is almost 11,000 data points at over 7,300 global sites. And then green up, green down, The majority of these come from Europe, and most of them from the European Phenology Campaign, which is a great collaborator of ours. And we have some folks on, like Marcus Schuster of Switzerland, who's one of the leads of of the European Phenology Campaign, and lots of folks who are partaking in that in Europe. So that's great. So all that data is out there. So if students can't go outside and take observations, the data is there to look at from the past. And the ISAT2 data is up there as well on open altimetry. So just wanted to pop this little map up here. This is from GlobeViz, the visualization system. This is just showing you where the pictures and the data are coming from trees, land cover, and greenings for the month of April. You can see we had tree height, 1,123 measurements from 603 sites. This is primarily, from, I should say, almost 100% from the, especially the tree height ones, from the NASA Globe Observer Trees tool. And then we have land cover, and it's a combination of people doing the trees tool and maybe going outside, and then greenings from going outside. So you can see we have lots of observations just from this past month in April 1st through April 30th. And this is just showing you what it looks like on the map. Each icon, the images are either land cover or trees, and then the icons are greenings, and then where the trees and land covers are that don't have the associated photos. I always want to say this, since we're in a crazy time right now, we're in the middle of this COVID-19 pandemic, we don't recommend going outside and taking NASA Globe Observer observations and direct observations, because we want you to stay healthy. I know a lot of places there's a stay-at-home order. But as I just mentioned, you can access all the Globe data through the Globe website. Okay, you just go to this link here and you can access it via the visualization system or the advanced data access tool, or you can have your students go back and look at the data that they've taken already and identify what's going on with their data. And then Globe has a response to the pandemic, and here's the link at the bottom. We'll also put that in the webinar section on the webpage. Just want you all to stay safe, stay healthy. It's a tough time right now. Keep with that social distancing. I know a lot of places are, changing things up. So just be careful, be vigilant, and, we'll all make it through this. All right. Here's something I wanted to just show you. This is something that popped across my radar not too long ago, and it's looking at forests. Since today we're going to be talking, John Moore is going to be talking about, the New Jersey Pinelands, the forest area of this section, New Jersey, where he's located in Palmyra Cove, New Jersey. This is called 25 Years of Forest Dynamics. And I want to just show this video to you. This is something that was, it was on the NASA Goddard Visualization Studio, Scientific Visualization Studio, and the URL for that is SVS, Scientific Visualization Studio, GSFC for Goddard Space Flight Center, .nasa.gov. And you can check this out. But let me play this for you now. It's a really cool video, and it really showcases how NASA has been looking at, the changing forest over a 25-year period. So here we go.
Forests are always changing. They're a very dynamic ecosystem. We've used data from the Landsat satellites to produce a comprehensive look at forest dynamics on the scale of human management and natural disturbances. Dark green pixels had no disturbances in the 25 years studied. Yellow shows where a disturbance happened in a particular year. At this scale, what really stands out are the large fires in the west and timber harvesting in the Pacific Northwest, Maine, and all across the Southeast. We need to know the rate of disturbance and how that rate is changing in order to understand how carbon is changing across the landscape. Here we can see the impact of policy decisions on forest dynamics. The various protected areas around Broken Bow Lake remain largely undisturbed compared to the surrounding region, which flickers with the telltale patches of timber harvesting. Any disturbance, whether from fire or hurricanes, mining or logging, impacts how much carbon the forest can store. The southern and central Appalachian Mountains, from Tennessee to West Virginia, are home to most of the disturbances resulting from mountaintop removal mining. Throughout Appalachia, coal mining has been a big industry since the 1860s, and mountaintop mining became dominant over the last 30 years. The Hobet mine in Boone County, West Virginia, existed before 1986. It has continued to expand throughout the course of the study. The pattern we see at the Hobet mine is replicated across the entire southern Appalachia. We mostly think of hurricanes wrecking houses, flooding cities, and endangering lives. but they can also damage forests, knocking down wide swaths of trees. Hurricane Hugo was a Category 4 storm when it struck South Carolina in September of 1989, and the scale of the disturbance shows in the 1990 data. 4.5 million acres of forest were affected by wind gusts and storm surges of salt water. Disturbances of this magnitude can release large amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere as the trees decompose. Tornadoes leave long tracts of damaged forests in their wake, showing as a bright line in the satellite imagery. These long straight tracks are extremely distinctive of this type of disturbance. On Mother's Day in 2008, several tornadoes in Georgia left a track 150 kilometers long and about 2 kilometers wide. For many tree species in the Rocky Mountain West, fire is a natural part of their life cycle, clearing space for new growth on the forest floor and releasing seeds from their pine cones. But climate change is projected to increase the intensity and frequency of wildfires. In 1988, Yellowstone National Park endured the largest fire ever recorded there. Many individual fires combined to damage 36% of the park, burning for several months. The scale of the disturbance is apparent in the following year's disturbance map. Less than 30% of the burned area regained forest cover by 2008, and the rate of recovery across Yellowstone has been quite variable, depending on the fire intensity and local conditions. Forests have always dealt with outbreaks of insects that can damage trees. In northern Colorado, the Rocky Mountain National Park did not have severe damage from mountain pine beetle before 2003. But the damage starts appearing in 2004 in low areas and spreads to higher elevations over the next few years. Climate change may result in more frequent episodes and trees less able to withstand the stress, but this will vary from region to region. Forests are a dynamic ecosystem. We need to know how fast they change and what is driving those changes if we ever hope to track how much carbon they're pulling out of the atmosphere and storing for us. The Landsat Archive and other remote sensing systems provide the means to map and measure disturbance rates over the last 40 years.
Yeah, that was a pretty powerful video, wasn't it? Let me know what you thought of that video in the comment section. Of course, it wasn't all inclusive of everything, but it was really showing those really dramatic events that happened in the last 25 years that really had an effect on forests across North America and in the United States. So very powerful video there, and it really can show you just how events can affect the forest and then have a domino effect. As talking about, all these trees are being, were destroyed, like they mentioned Hurricane Hugo, all the saltwater inundation and, there's millions of acres of trees being, affected by it, thus, not allowing, thus changing the amount of carbon being able to be pulled in and stored by these trees. So pretty amazing video, I think. So glad I got to show you that, but just wanted to highlight that because it's something that I've seen for a little while now, and I just wanted to share that with everyone. All right, so I'm going to pass it now over to Dorian. And Dorian is going to, as she did last webinar, talk about the champion trees, and she's going to have a focus on New Jersey and the Pinelands, which John is going to talk about very shortly. So take it away, Dorian.
All right, get myself unmuted here. So I love it that I have now been selected as the person that gets to take a look at the champion trees for wherever in the world we are talking about. So when we're talking about champion trees, we're basically talking about kind of like the world record setting trees from different locations. I'm going to be hearing in just a little bit here about this reserve that Morris is going to tell us about. And I just wanted to show on a map here that it is absolutely humongous. It covers about 22% of New Jersey's land area. And it is home to lots and lots of different plants and birds. And also, super important, it is an aquifer for lots and lots of water. So keeping that water clean. When I went and looked and got some information about this reserve, I also found that there's a lot of neat scientific studies that are taking place there right now on a variety of different things. So when you get a chance, you might take advantage of some time in front of the computer to see some of the science that's currently being done. So let's take a look at a couple of the champion trees. Next slide, please. And both of the champion trees that I'm going to be sharing, let's see, next slide, there we go. And here's this website. I thought this was really neat. So New Jersey would like, has this special site, and I put it in the chat, and they teach you about their trees. They also would like you to share pictures and nominate a tree. They give you some information on how to measure trees, but of course, if you're using the Globe Observer, you already know how to do that, and it's easy as can be right there on your smartphone technology. And they also talk about tree care and some other neat things. So I thought that was pretty cool. So now we're going to take a look at two of the champion trees from New Jersey. Next slide. So both the champion trees to be oaks. Here is a gorgeous oak. It is 128 feet or 39 meters tall. So just absolutely massive. And the circumference is about 201 inches, about 510 centimeters. So that's a pretty wide tree. Last month when we were looking at trees, I was looking at a tree in Malta. And one of the neat things about that tree is its circumference was as big as the height of the tree. So that's another thing I absolutely adore about trees, is just how different they are, kind of like human beings. And next slide, please. And so there was another tree that I selected that this time it's another oak, but this one is a swamp white oak. And it's about 105 feet, about 32 meters, also has a pretty wide circumference, actually wider than the one that we were just looking at, about 268 inches, 680 centimeters. And this is, and one of the things that they explain with these champion trees is, and as Brian points out a lot, is not only are they beautiful to look at and they provide a fantastic habitat for wildlife of all kinds, but also they help everybody out by helping to kind of serve as purifiers for the water as it's draining down, and then also absorbing the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and storing the carbon in the wood. So I hope you enjoy seeing those champion trees, and I hope you check a few out. Thanks. All done on my end.
All right, so let me, before we get to John's presentation, our June webinar. Our June webinar is a special from Science Club in Argentina. They're going to be talking about what they did for preparation and submission to the Globe IVSS competition, and it's an overview of the combination of trees, land cover, water quality, and mosquito habits. Should be habitat. Sorry about that. I have to change that. But what I want you to know is one of our campaign colleagues and friends here, Anna Prieto, she is going to be on the webinar with her students as part of the club, and we're excited to hear about what they did in order to prepare for the global IVSS and how they took their observations and measurements and what they did as far as so they're going to be doing a report out on this. And if there's anyone else on the webinar that wants to do any type of report out of what they did as far as Globe IVSS in relation to trees and land cover and how they're combined, please let me know. My email. You can get a hold of me because you get emails from me all the time. That would be great. So this is the June webinar. This is Tuesday, June 2nd at 4:00 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 8 p.m. UTC, 10 p.m. Central European Standard Time. So stay tuned for that, and you'll see something come out about that shortly. Now, let's now get into today's feature webinar with, once again, John Moore. John D. Moore, talking about the New Jersey Pinelands, the nation's first national preservation area. And as a reminder, John is the Executive Director at the Institute for Earth Observations at the Palmyra Cove Nature Park in Palmyra Cove, New Jersey in the United States. So I will stop sharing now and I will pass it over to John. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Brian. And we'll get this going. Hello, everybody. Give me a second here. And we're going to go right here. Okay, so welcome everybody. And so some of what I'm going to talk about, since you're all Globe teachers, and I was a Globe teacher as well, is some of the steps along the way I did with my students, and share some of my happenings in my personal life that led me to where I am today. And when I was talking to Brian way back when he was first starting this campaign, I had a conversation with him and talked about trees and kind of the role they played in my life, and how what I used to tell my students is one thing does lead to another. So always be conscious of that. So we'll get started here, and let's see. Okay, so the first thing here is welcome to New Jersey. So New Jersey has a reputation, well, maybe several reputations. One is most people in the world think of it like this over here and this picture over here, which are both true. They're up the northern end of the state. New Jersey is one of those states that North Jersey is really the population and the whole economic base is attached to New York City. And down south where I am, we're associated with Philadelphia. And it is the Garden State, and some people get a chuckle out of that. Many times over my life when I went to speak places, they would ask me where I'm from. I would say I'm from New Jersey. They'd have a little laugh. Then they say, oh, well, what do you do there? I teach environmental science. And then they would have a really good laugh, because most people don't think that New Jersey has an environment, but it does. Applying to what we're going to talk about today, some of the amazing facts is right here. New Jersey still is the most populated, density populated state in the United States. So when we're going to talk about the Pinelands today, just keep that in mind because it makes it more significant. Over here in this side, blueberry, so Jersey fresh. The southern state is a lot of agriculture, big blueberry, cranberries, which we're going to see later, Jersey corn, and Jersey tomatoes. Back in the old days, if you ate Campbell's tomato soup here in the United States, it probably came from New Jersey tomatoes. Also, this is down the Jersey Shore. This is my little Chamber of Commerce beach. We have beautiful beaches here that a lot of people don't know about, barrier beaches. And down in the Delaware Bay, whales. There's a beluga whale. One time, a couple of years ago, one of these guys came up the Delaware River up close to where the cove is, actually took a ride up the Trenton and back. Didn't see it, but it made some good news. So what we're talking about today, and some of the cool things about this, what strikes it as unique, is the Pinelands Parks and Recreation Act. You see here, it's 1978. So you have to go back to 1978. I mean, Earth Day was 8 years old. Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act are in 74. So this is relatively early on in the environmental policy movements. And so this act was passed, and I'm not going to read all this, but this is kind of from the Pinelands Preservation Alliance. That's just what they talk about. It's kind of the overview. I mean, you can go back and look at it, but there's a lot going on. Dorian mentioned some of these things too. So there's a there's a Pinelands history, there's a Pinelands forest, there's Pinelands vegetation, Pinelands wildlife, and Pinelands aquifer. All those things play in the piece. But just think about all the United States right here, New Jersey, in my backyard became the first national preservation area. And that's what we're going to take a look at today and talk about why that happened. So we'll move along here. So the Pinelands, this is the actual Pinelands Act. And you see here, it's over 1 million acres. Dorian had the map up earlier. I have another map so you can look at it again. But it's a good chunk of the entire state of New Jersey when it comes down to it. And you'll see that in a moment. I brought in this picture because it looks nice, one thing, but also these are pitch pines. And I'm going to talk about fires as part of forestry a little bit later, but you can see a lot of people are used to like white pines are around a lot. Pitch pines, really rough bark, and you see that kind of leaf that comes out of it. Again, it's talking about ecological, natural, recreational, agriculture, all those reasons why we do that. That led to the Pinelands Protection Act, which is different. This is Peter Nelson, Dr. Nelson, you like this, comprehensive management plan. And you can see Philadelphia is like right over in here. New York's off the map. But all this is in a management plan. This is the first, this is actually a land use management plan, which is unheard of. Unless you're Dr. Nelson, you might not be familiar with comprehensive land use plans in your town, county, or state. This was a pretty strict plan, and it has to do all with the Pinelands, which was 100% ecological reasons for it being there. It is to even today still a hotbed of politics, because nobody in the United States likes to be told what they're doing with their land. And back in '78, there was, you know, in the Pinelands fringe areas, you were out in the woods, out, not many people living around here, but as population keeps developing, then the stress on their on that land becomes even more in a political nature. But that has not changed. I don't think it's going to change. But just to show you here, this is really the hardcore Horton State Forest. This is where a lot of the water, I'm going to talk about that, the aquifer is. And there's a story about that because there was a man, Mr. Horton. He donated all that land to the state. And that was a nice guy. This is part of the cultural information. But maybe he wasn't such a nice guy. What he did was buy this land, because as I said, right over here is Philadelphia. He was going to sell that water to Philadelphia, and interstate commerce prohibited him from doing that. So he deeded it to the state of New Jersey with the specification that no water ever leave the Pinelands. So we'll see about that in another 50 or 100 years when water becomes a bigger issue than it already is. Okay, so I have a lot of pictures. So this is what it looks like. I bring the fire tower down here because this is where you get these pictures. I'm pretty sure this, so here's the part going back into my younger years. Back in my 20s, my friends and I discovered the Pinelands. There wasn't internet back then. There was USGS topographic maps. We got a hold of them. And it all started with one of my friends reading a book by John McPhee on the Pine Barrens. And that's a nice cultural, environmental book. That's what really started it in New Jersey and why it's so strong in New Jersey. So you see this vast area, but we came upon it, and first guy bought a Jeep, then I bought a Jeep, and pretty soon 3 or 4 of us had Jeeps. So we could take all of us down there, and we covered, I believe, every square inch of the Pine Barrens that there is. We would just go as far as we could go, see where we could get lost. That's where I learned, I was probably 20, maybe 21 then, how accurate the USGS maps are. I mean, you're out in the middle of nowhere, and these roads are 100% accurate. So they have the fire towers back in the old days. I'm not sure if it's true now, but, you know, used to be able to get there. So we couldn't get into the tower, but they didn't care. We come all the way up the steps. And these are the views we used to get. So it's beautiful views. Go out there at nighttime, and we see pine cruising, or what's called pine cruising. That's what we talk about. We would go out after work and do that. Okay, now here's some things we want to talk about. So this is, of course, the Landsat satellite. So now here, these are what you're used to looking at with some of the tree seminars and using satellites. But you see it right here. So this is New Jersey. This is the Delaware River. This is the Susquehanna River, Chesapeake Bay. Washington, D.C. is, should be there. Here's Philadelphia. I'm right here. We'll get a little closer. But this is the Delaware Bay, Chesapeake Bay. So you got that. So there is 17 trillion, that's with a T, gallons of this aquifer is labeled as a pristine aquifer. And 17 trillion gallons sounds like a lot. We hear a lot of talks about trillions of dollars spent in these last couple of weeks. Trillion is a hard number to get your head around. So the reason I brought up this picture is that this surface area of the Chesapeake Bay is about 17 trillion gallons. So to give you an idea of how much water is under there, I have another slide coming up, but Dorian had one earlier. It's really like all under this area here. So you can read some of the facts along there about, of course, the roles that plays. Keep pressing the wrong button. Okay, here's a better view of it. The essential facts about the aquifers, and you can see that there. Now, before I get this out of my mind, go back to the reason we talk about aquifers is not only because that's important, you know, aquifers are important for obvious reasons, but you hear the Pinelands Act, but the Pinelands are really came out to protect the water more than the trees. So a lot of people are surprised about that. Although one of the slides, I probably blasted through it already, but had about, you know, this is the largest land mass of natural forest on the East Coast. So that's a pretty incredible thing too in little old New Jersey here. But so there's a couple of things. So again, for those of you who are not familiar with New Jersey, or some of you from outside the US, this would be Philadelphia, right across from Camden, New Jersey. Trenton is our state capital, right up here. New York City is up in here. Peter Smith's online, that's where he's at. Chatsworth, we're going to talk about that. That's actually informally, again, as a cultural thing, known as the capital of the pines. So there's probably, back in the day, 50 people that lived there, but we'll talk a little bit more about that when I show you some other things. So some more pictures. This is what it looks like. It's absolutely beautiful. I have to say, going back in my history, I was at the age where I was, you know, getting into college, or I was in year 2, and I lived in New Jersey, and everybody thinks big, I think, about moving. I can pretty accurately say this is one of the things that held me in New Jersey when I discovered the Pinelands. Because all the sciencey stuff I just talked about, artistically, you know, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful place to be. And it's astounding that, let's see, this is probably 40 miles from Philadelphia, if you can believe that. So my home is about 15 miles, and I'm going to take you through a little tour later on. This is only like 15 miles away. We used to drive down there in 20 minutes. So it's an amazing place right there. So more pictures, lots of water as you see. One of the things I wanted to point out that's a culture, see how dark this is? It looks like iced tea. That's not Photoshop, that's really the color. If you go in there, swimming or something, have a t-shirt on or a white shirt, it's going to come out brown. And that's because of all the cedar water. And from that came bog irons. I'm going to talk about batstow in a second, but back in this day, in the early Revolutionary War days, between Philadelphia and Batstow, which I'm going to show you, was Batstow was like another huge city like Philadelphia. I'm going to show you a couple things about that. But one of the things that people came down in these rivers through the pines was bring up bog iron, and they made musket balls out of it, particularly down the Batstow area. So there's a lot of culture there too. Of course, there's wildlife, and Dorian also mentioned that. So I just pulled these, there's all kinds, there's more and more. Some unique things, there are endangered species, both in terms of animals. This corn snake is an endangered species. And there's a lot of plants. There's some orchids back there that nobody knows about, except for, I guess, very high level biologists at the state level. I know a long time ago, there were people from Russia over here, a lot of botanists come over. They keep it secret because they don't want people going around looking at them. and trampling down things. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, so we're going to go here. A lot of red. These are all cranberries. So New Jersey, as you see here, third largest cranberry. So if you have cranberry juice or cranberry sauce at Christmas time, got a 1 in 3 chance it came from a place like this. Luckily, all this water is kind of pristine water. This is what it looks like from afar, the bogs. This is how they capture them. They're all dry, the plants grow, they flood the bogs, and the berries float to the top. And then this is an aerial view over here. And then they kind of just scoop them up like a boom you see when there's an oil spill. And these are people down in here, rake them together, and that's how they start the harvest process. These are beautiful too. They're good to eat, good to drink. This is a beautiful thing to see. Cranberry bogs, particularly in the fall when they're harvested. The colors of these trees are unbelievable. We talked about the pine trees, and I think Dorian also mentioned it, but it's really a pine oak forest. So the color in the fall here is just outstanding. All right, so I said there's going to be a little history and folklore. Thanks for a couple of these pictures from Dr. Chris, who's online. Thank you, Chris. So this is Badstow. This was the mansion. Here's the area in here of the Badstow property. So Badstow, if you visit it, this is Badstow Lake. All down this area, there's a whole village, and you can go there now. It's a state park, and they had blacksmiths. This is a whole big community. Pennsylvania is up this way. All this way heads over to the east, and you can just see it's just open and open. This is a current picture. Down here, another big thing that I'm not going to talk about him too much, but you can read about him. Big thing about the New Jersey Devils. So this is where it's from. You know that there's a hockey team, Jersey Devils, up in Mike Smith's territory. We don't pay attention to them. We're down Flyers territory, but that's the other New Jersey. But there's a whole big folklore back there, and people go looking for it, just like people look for Bigfoot in other cultural things. Fire, we hear a lot about fire now, particularly if you're in California and some of the other states. So it's an issue. It's a policy issue about open burning versus controlled burning if you're a forester. And I will say this, that fire in the New Jersey Pinelands is an absolute necessity. It turns out, remember I was saying, if you look closely, you kind of see it's like shaggy barks. It's real rough bark, it's not smooth. And if you think of it, I'm sure with my hands, it kind of overlaps each other like that or something. But in the middle here is where the seeds are. So when fire happens, that bark catches on fire, expands, and shoots the seeds out amongst the ground. That's how it reforests itself. If New Jersey were to control burn or control forest fires, then the Pinelands would move through succession, which we're going to talk about in a second as well, and basically they would become no more. One of the dangerous things that firefighters down here are incredible. This back, remember the first slide I was showing you this. Well, what happens is when the fire starts, like if you look down here, the sap in this tree actually boils. And it will come up, it sets this top branches, which would be these things, and they literally explode. And when that does it, it could, like this tree here, for example, could be shooting flaming sap all the way over. So this looks like a control bird because they're standing around. When it's a real forest fire, it's bad news. And the winds come and it changes. Probably about, maybe it's 40 years ago now, there was a huge part of the forest that caught on fire and the fire turned. And we lost, I don't know, maybe 6 to 12. I can't remember the number of firefighters. I went to that site when I was in college. It was so hot that the brass fittings on the fire trucks melted. So that's the heat. So when you see these men and women today out fighting these forest fires, in all around the world, then hats off to them, because that's extremely dangerous job. And we're not even talking about smoke inhalation. But here in New Jersey, in the Pinelands, we got to keep it going. So another policy thing, they start setting the woods on fire. You can see the smoke from all around. And then people don't like that too much. Air pollution, you know, the discussion goes on back and forth, but you need to know the science behind it. Okay, so now we're going to move to a section. This is back home here at the Cove. And we're talking about forest succession. So it's kind of coming off of how the Pinelands, so we're way towards Philadelphia, so we're on the edge. But part of our Palmyra Cove Nature Park, which is 250 acres, and we're on the Delaware River, 7 miles north. I'm going to show you some pictures in a second. But in the center of our park is also a dredge basin for the Army Corps of Engineers for the Delaware River. This is a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers dredge ship. Goes along, it's like a big vacuum cleaner. I've been out on it, goes on, fills up the whole hole, then it comes back, and this is where they grade out. We had about 70 acres. This is what they do. It pumps out from the ship, fills up the area. They kind of let gravity, try to filter out by natural selection the particulate matter. Of course, all this is tested. Then it's pumped back into the Delaware, and it's all tested out there as well. I'm going to go to something different than this. I might get back to it, and I might not. So hold on, we'll see it, because I want to show you some other things. So I need to switch screens for a second. So let's see if I remember this, Brian. I'm going to go to here. Okay, are you seeing that? Are you seeing Google Earth?
No.
Okay. So let me try this again. This is how we do it. There, now you're seeing it.
Yep, good.
Okay, good. Okay, so here we are, starting location. This is Palmyra Cove Nature Park. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Those of you that get dizzy, just shut your eyes for a little bit. I might go a little too fast. So here's the beginning of Philadelphia. This dredge cell is just talking about is right here. So you see this big square. Where I'm speaking to you from is right here. This is our building. This is the Institute for Earth Observation. And this is actually the Palmyra Cove. That's a freshwater tidal basin. So that's kind of a cool thing. This used to be a drive-in movies, and this is Route 73, and that's the Coney Bridge. Okay, so to give you an idea of where we work, this is our Globe partnership. This is where we do a lot of work. You've seen probably some of the stuff we've done one place or another. And so we're very fortunate when I came here to work and brought the partnership here that, you know, this is my backyard to play in. So we have some water, we have a river, and all these trails. So this is where we're starting from. So now I'm going to back out a little bit. And then here I'm going to take you over to now, if you don't think this takes guts doing Google Earth Live, let's see, let me find out, make sure where I am.
You're a pro, John.
Okay, here we go. BCIT Medford, Burlington County Institute of Technology. That's my old school. I bring this up because I wanted to say this is one of the first Globe schools, because I was one of the first Globe teachers 25 years ago. But you can see here's Pinelands knocking right on our door. So I had a great place, a Globe place, because place to have my pixel was right here. Dr. Nelson right here, including the pond and the tree. And there's a lot, you know, looking at Google Pro or Google Earth, there's a lot of image analysis you can do right from there. And Peter probably has better ways of doing it. But back in the old days when we had this, you can tell a lot from these images. Now that you can zoom in so far, you can, and if you know a little bit about what's going on. So it's a good way to teach satellite imagery versus ground truth verification. So these are all agricultural fields. So you can see these marks in here. Well, they're either clouds from, shadows from clouds, or they're wet spots up there. And then you can go through and just start identifying. This is a elementary school that was next door. It just gives you a little introduction about where we were. But you can see here, if I come out a little bit, how quickly, like this is 25 miles from Philadelphia. It's pretty close. So now we're going to go down, head towards the Pines. I might have to zoom out. Okay, and we're going to go here to @ Lake. Okay, before I get there, I'm going to zoom out so you can see where we are. Remember that map? You can kind of see the borderline going around here. So you see there's houses right up against it. So these people that are buying this land, you know, they want to build house, they want to build a garage, and there's all kinds of variances you have to go through. It's kind of rough to do that, but we're going to skip that to get moving here. And so we're going to come in at @ Lake. So these lakes are beautiful cedar lakes. Trivia question for New Jersey. How many natural lakes are there in New Jersey? Answer 0. There's a dam at every one, so these are all streams. But what we're going to do now is, and even I was amazed to see this. Let's see. I get rid of this thing. There we go. Okay, we're going to take the little man and go down to street view. Now, here we go. Boom, boom, boom. Here we are in the Pinelands. There's @ Lake. Beautiful place. You can rent a canoe right there. There's some cabins up in here if you want to come on vacation. This is convenient, but it ruined the scenery of it. They built a nice state swimming recreational area, so it's safe, but took away the beauty of Pinelands. So be it. That's progress, I guess. But now we're going to take you on the real tour. We're going to turn around here. Hold on. And let me zoom out. Let's see. I'm not going to zoom out here. So we're actually going to go pine cruising. So this is where I used to go with my Jeep like 40 years ago. Right back here. So I'm going to get in, past some of the area that's the state forest office. And we can actually, I can't believe Google Earth actually went back in here. So they went back pretty far, I would say a couple miles. So I'm going to take it back a little bit. Just have to hold on while I keep clicking to get back there. Okay, let's stop and see where we are now. Okay, this is pretty good. This will do it. So you see the dirt roads. They're the ones that you saw from the satellite picture. They're all on the USGS map, and this is what it looks like. So I'll try to go slow. You can see here's the oaks. You can see some of the pitch pines here. You can go up and look at the top of the trees. We had our trees app. We could measure that tree while we're here. And you get an idea. So I was really happy that I could do this for you all. Take you on what we used to call the 50-cent tour for the Pinelands. So those of you that don't like trees will get bored fast, but you remember the satellite picture of how big the Pinelands forest areas of National Reserve. This is what it looks like. That whole area. You can just go on forever and ever through these woods. Up there's a little cabin there. See if I can go back a little further. And kind of just get another view, look at what it looks around. Now, going back to the culture, if you get that John McVie's book, it'll tell you about there's a book called The Forgotten Towns of the Pinelands. They're all marked there. The weirdos that we were when we were younger, maybe I still am, we take the Jeeps back there, go find a place that would give us a purpose, a mission, and we go sit and find different locations, which sometimes were a few bricks or stones. Sometimes it was just a hole in the ground. My friends and I used to go down, let's see what's actually down this way, a little further, and you would come to a bridge that crosses Quaker Stream, Quaker Bridge. There's folklore with that about, oh, by the way, let me back up a second. That road I just took you on, a little further down, turns into 2 lanes. And the legend is that's the first dual highway in the United States because there's so much stagecoach traffic between Philadelphia and Batstow, which I showed you. But coming back to Quaker Bridge, the stagecoach coming in there, it was pouring down rain, and the driver saw a white buck jump across the road. They've never seen one, and they do exist, by the way, and jumped down to go look for it. And when they did, they heard the rushing water and found out that the bridge was out. And so all the people in the stagecoach would have been killed. And so the legend is, if you see a white buck cross in front of the road, that's a sign of danger. So I don't know if that's true or not, but if I see a white buck, I stop where I am and take a look around a little bit. So, okay. So I think I'm doing pretty good here. Let me just get back to my original thing here. Nope, this is it. Share that. I'm not even going to try that. I'm afraid to. So that was our Google Earth tour. Just to remind you, we went to Palmyra Cove Nature Park. You can find all these things yourself. To Bronx County Institute of Technology, which used to be a Globe school, but now it's not. At Zion Lake, we went to some names you can look up on the way. This is my final slide. So here's the thing. You want to do something to save the earth? Plant a tree, then of course, measure it. And while you're measuring it, do land cover as well. So I wanted to end, and I'll just say, like, start in the beginning, didn't really talk about it, but where I grew up, there was a big creek came off the Delaware. My town had a woods zone that wasn't a conservation area. Back when I was a kid, there was no such thing as a conservation area. But I lived my life down there, so you don't know what that led to. I went to college. My majors were environmental science and land use planning. So guess what? I was looking at these types of things. I don't think there was something called an environmental land use planning when I was in school, but you see how those pieces were coming in my head and my experiences. Found out with my friends with the Jeeps, and I told you the story about getting into the pines. Seeing that, I got on my local environmental commission. I was probably 22 at the time. We got that area around our town zoned as conservation area, and it is to this day. I graduated from college. Guess what my first job was? Shade Tree Commission of Camden County. And we worked on doing small, more urban area playgrounds, planting trees, planted over 1,500 trees a year in each year that I worked there, which was about 3 years. So I have a great affection for trees. They did away with that job, or I'd probably still be doing it now, but life, has you on a path here. So, when I talk to students, I always say, look for these little things that pique your interest and go with, what you feel in your heart. I believe myself, I'm saying, is I went to school and was an environmental science major, and there wasn't any jobs. My mother used to say to me, are you crazy? What are you going to do? And I said, I don't know, but this is what I like. I'm just going to keep moving ahead. So my message to the young people is, even though you don't see something right in front of us, you got to look down the road a little bit, maybe 5 or 10 years, and it appears, but get yourself ready. So participating in GLOBE, participating in the trees campaign, participating in the land cover campaign. And by the way, this plant a trees thing with Dr. C's urban heat island, that's all about trees. You want to solve that problem. There's the answer right there. Plant a tree, go for municipal parks in recovering some of these areas. And I think this, going into the future, the young people that you all are teaching now can get a hold of this. And young people, just as I was when I was young, want to be doing something, I 100% of the time say you want to do something for the environment, you want to do something for climate. This is the one thing, it's easy to do, and we should all be going out and doing that. So that's my final lesson or sermon for the day. And with that, I thank you all for tuning in with me, and I love being your colleagues in Globe, and look forward to seeing you in person somewhere soon. So with that, Brian, I turn it back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, John. That was absolutely amazing. Yeah. I know some people may have some questions, so I'll let people either put them in the chat for you, John, or unmute themselves. I just have one quick question. You don't have to go back to it on the Google Maps. When you were showing Atzian Lake,
Yes.
there was a spot kind of like right just north of there. It looked like it was kind of in the middle of the Pinelands, and all I saw a word was their tabernacle. I didn't know, I couldn't tell if it was a development, but it was strange because, you saw, like you mentioned, all the neighborhoods around the borders, but then just above that of Atzian Lake, in the middle of the Pinelands, you saw this area, and I couldn't tell if it was agricultural or if it was a community. I couldn't tell.
Yeah, it is. Tabernacle is a community. It's small. Again, going back over 30 or 40 years, if you went to Tabernacle 30 years ago, it'd be you and the deer out there. They do have blueberry farms out there, so it's mostly agriculture. Sure. But there's other highways. So general thing in land use planning is if you don't want development to happen, then don't build a highway. I'll give you that simple advice, because then the development comes right down the highway. So as that's come in from the west, from Philadelphia, and as the short communities build up, it's coming in from the east. So when I was a land use student at Stockton, I remember writing papers that my professor, this is another good story. I wrote what I thought was a great paper. Of course, what student doesn't do that? And I talked about New Jersey being the first state that's going to feel the crunch. So suburban sprawl would have to end because New Jersey can't run into an ocean. And he thought that was ridiculous, and I was so mad I threw it out. And I regret that. That's one of my life regrets. But so there's the highways there. They built the Garden State Parkway. There's other state highways, and so yes, civilization follows those highways. So yeah, Tabernacle, small community even today, and it kind of is in the middle of the pines. That was there though prior to the Pinelands Preservation Act. So some of those, what are affectionately known as piney towns, date back, back into like Civil War days.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Does anybody have any specific questions for John about the presentation, but anything else? And feel free to put that in the chat if you have any questions, or if you, what I want to quickly ask Peter Nelson. Peter, you put a couple things in the chat that are super important, specifically the ones about this is why you need to know what the land cover is from the ground, and a really great activity. Would you like to reinforce that, Peter? I think it's something in case it gets lost in the chat at some point. I think it's really good, some of the things that you mentioned there, and I think that we should get it out there in words so people understand what you were talking about, because it's so vital.
I thank you for that, Brian. Yeah, so my big thing is what John actually showed us, that ability to go from the satellite view and use Google Earth as one platform that allows us to jump into that pixel and to better understand why that color is green, or why it's blue, or why it's gray. He showed us how to use the Google Street View option. Which is exactly what we're trying to use or collect pictures, or on the ground pictures, using the Globe Observer mobile app and the land cover tool. Because if you notice, like that picture that we were looking at was actually from 2016. And one of the things that I noticed just by being able to look at that ground view is how little of the sky I was able to see. How green the trees were at that location, not only on the ground, but also how tall those trees were. So I was just struck at how useful all of those on the ground pictures can be to help me understand a location I've never been to before, which is this pine forest. And so, you know, we really want to encourage you to help us to create this global data set of on the ground reference photos that are maybe in places where the Google Street View photos haven't actually been. And I was noticing, John, actually, looking at our globe map, we actually don't have many locations or observations from the pine forest area there. And so that's a great opportunity to add some new data into a data set that we're trying to develop here through the GLOBE program, so that we have that reference. So I just want to encourage that, because John really demonstrated great use for being able to jump inside of those pixels to better understand the satellite view and to help us track changes over time. So I really appreciate that nice tour of tools that you gave to us, John, because Google Earth is a very powerful tool that allows us to see these high resolution satellite imagery and to better understand what we gain from that above ground view, as well as what happens when we combine it together with on the ground measurements from either the GLOBE program or a variety of other tools that are out there, including Google Street View. So I wanted to highlight that one in particular, and I've dropped in the chat a variety of other maps or other tools that help to, or data sets that are out there that can help you if you're interested in describing or exploring your part of the world. I include one in there called Global Forest Watch. And I went and did a little exploring while we were looking at that area and found quite a few areas of changes, tree cover gain, tree cover loss, all kinds of interesting dynamics that I was able to explore to better understand this area that I've never been to before. So I really appreciate that perspective that you gave to us, John, to help me to better understand what those pictures look like and a little bit more about the type of trees that I've been seeing in some of these pictures on the ground, as well as flying over New Jersey on my pseudo satellite view of things. So I really appreciate that connection to help us to understand how we can make that connection between what those green pixels look like on the ground compared to what's actually there. And then your insight in terms of why they're there, why we actually have the lakes that we do or the colors that we do. Very helpful and insightful. So you gave us all some new tools to think about and to maybe use to go explore our local forest.
Perfect. Thank you, Peter. Yeah, so that's super important that those online tools are accessible and as user-friendly as possible. And, you know, what John showed you today just shows you what you and your students can do, or anybody can do, you know, to look at all the different variables that Peter just mentioned. So anything else, everybody? And as I mentioned here in the chat, I'll be putting all the links that are in the chat from today from Peter and all the other people who put in links, Peter and Dr. Schumann and John. I'll put those under the archive campaign on the website once everything gets processed. Video has to get processed through Zoom, so a lot of other things have to happen. And then once we get it up on once I get it up on the website, I'll send out a notification that it's available for viewing, and all the links will be there. All right. Thank you all so much. We're about 10 minutes over, but thank you all so much for this. Remember, the next webinar is Tuesday, June 2nd. You can check that information. It's at 4:00 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and you can check that information on the webinar page as well. So thank you all, and we will see you next time.